Murder Report, an original novel by James Acosta. Chapter 2. Carol dialed her best friend in the world, Sam Harrison. He made his career being a detective, and not just your run-of-the-mill detective. Sam was a paranormal investigator. Although Carol didn't believe in ghosts, Sam was the only detective that she could trust and knew him for 5 years. After a few rings, Sam picked up on the other end. "Hello, Carol. How are you doing?" "I'm doing good, but I had something unusual happen at my home, and I need you to come over right away." "Okay, I'll be on my way then." Sam was always prompt. Not before long, Sam was knocking on her front door. In less than 45 minutes. Carol opened the door and invited him in. She explained the whole situation to him. As she was talking to him, Sam stood there with both arms folded and nodded his head silently. He was listening to every word she said. When Carol finished, Sam said, "Well, I can check to see if anyone broke into your house first. I'll look around for any signs of forced entry at your front door and back door. I'll also check all the windows and I'll dust for prints. If I can't find anything at all, I'd say there's a good chance it could be paranormal. I know that you don't believe in that sort of thing, but if I can't find a sign of forced entry, then that means it could be ghost activity." Carol shuddered at the idea of it being a ghost. "Well, I know that I can trust you. I'm sure it's a simple case of a break-in. In any case, I should be lucky that I'm still alive." Carol glanced at the clock on the wall. She was already 2 hours late. "Damn it, I have to head out now. I have to do that interview." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Oh, yeah? With who?" "Well, I'm sure you know about that sicko, the crazy, infamous killer, Psycho Sloppy Joe. We got an exclusive chance to interview him." Sam had a look of anger on his face. "You're talking to that disgusting piece of shit?" "Well, I'll tell you what to do. Even though he's locked up, you watch yourself around him. You hear me? He might not physically do harm, but psychologically he could." "Well, I'll let you go then. Take care. I'll look into this for you most definitely." Sam turned to leave with both hands in his pockets and turned to look back at Carol's kitchen table. Carol waved goodbye to Sam and headed out to her car. She opened up the door and was soon on her way to work to pick up the camera guy. 10 minutes later, she pulled up at the front entrance of her work. Max, the camera guy, was standing out in the front, patiently checking his watch. He wore a blue hat, had shades on, also wore blue shorts and a tropical shirt. Max had his camera safely tucked away in its carrying case. He appeared to be in his early 30s and was very short, about 5 foot tall. He also had short brown hair and wore a pair of glasses. Max walked up to Carol's car and opened up the passenger back door. He carefully placed his case in one of the back seats and made his way over to the passenger side and opened the door. Max then took a seat. Both exchanged hellos with each other. Not before long, they were both on their way to the restaurant Super Subs. Carol drove up to the drive-thru and placed an order for the biggest Sloppy Joe sandwich they had and a large size of fries. They collected the food and made their way to the mental institution. In no time at all, Carol and Max were both sitting in front of Joe. Max was nervous but quiet. He was busy placing his camera on a tripod and steadying it just right so it could easily focus directly on Joe and Carol. When he was ready, Max hit the record button. Joe was just about finishing up his sandwich and fries. He also had food smears all over his face. Once the food was completely consumed, Joe placed his hands together. "That was delicious. I haven't had a meal like that in a while," Carol said. "Last we talked, I only wrote your details down in the notebook. This time we're going to start filming like you asked. We have a long time to go until 8 p.m. Without further ado, let's start talking about at least the first 2 victims you murdered." Joe's face radiated a disturbing, wicked smile. His eyes bored hard into Carol's. "Gladly," Joe began. "As I had said before, I had pushed the urge to murder away, way back into my mind. to where it wouldn't resurface. The island I owned was private. I didn't have to answer to the police or any government, so it became my killing grounds. This was the perfect place to murder without any witnesses. I did, however, still had people living on my island as well. I hired a bunch of caretakers for my garden, food needs, etc. When it came time for me to do my first murder, I would send them all back to their homes for a while. I also made sure that they were compensated, no matter what. They would be gone for about a week or two. That way, no one else would be on the island but the soon-to-be victim. How I lured my victims out to my island was easy. Well, for me anyway. I had put a lot of thought into it. I made a list of ways to cover my tracks. You see, that small pig farm that I mentioned earlier. When little piggies get hungry enough, though, they'll eat just about anything edible. This counts for humans as well. The moment that Joe said that, Max felt sick to his stomach and stumbled over his camera for a second. He fumbled as he had to readjust the camera and tripod. Carol's mouth opened wide. Well, I have heard that before. However, not from someone I've met. Joe widened his smile and carried on with his story. Well, you are. That was sure funny. I could totally use a good laugh. Anyways, here is the first story about my victim. He happened to be a man. You see, I am as straight as a toothpick. In order to play out my plan, I had to act like I played on both sides to a certain point. When it came time to lure out my first victim, I hit up the internet and I made an account on a dating site. I made an account specifically for people who were thrill seekers. People who like to go skydiving, bungee jumping, and deep-sea scuba diving. When Joe mentioned that last part, Carol's blood instantly ran cold. She also felt shortness in her breath. Her hair stood up straight on her arms, thinking, what? No. That dream just had to be a coincidence. There's no way that there could be a connection. Joe continued, wearing that messed up smile on his face. The thing is, I knew that if I was going to seek these types of people out, I would have to start taking lessons for all those events. I did just that. I took the lessons to the point that I mastered them all easily, to where I knew I could do it with someone else who might not know just how to do it. I knew I'd have to play that part altogether. So the first victim's name was Chad. He was around my age and he sent me a message asking about my profile. Not before long, we hit off and started to chat for a few hours. After a few weeks, we met up at a local bar and dated. Not too long after that. You see, I knew that I had to work on gaining his trust before I'd invite him out to my private island. Once the trust was finally obtained, I set up a date in a city at a location that would be away from any witnesses. This would be, well, more like a private place, a hotel room that I would check out. This hotel always seemed to be very empty all the time, so this was the perfect place for me at the time. When I arrived, I would have room service ordered right away. I made sure to order just about whatever it was that Chad enjoyed on the menu. After the food and drinks were digested, we'd talk and enjoy the evening together. My intentions were to never have sex with my victims, even if they happened to throw themselves at me. I always told myself I'd never get too attached to any of my victims, and also to never have any emotions. I suppose I didn't feel anything anyways, considering I am a serial killer and all. I say this now, yet there was one victim that happened to change how I would feel about that. However, we'll get to that one later. As Joe was droning on about all of this, Carol was still disturbed about what she was hearing. All at the same time, she was getting annoyed. It seemed like Joe's storytelling was all over the place. She needed him to be a little more direct. Quite a bit of time had passed since they had started. Max had to go to the bathroom a few times during the course of the second interview. This meant he had to pause the camera each time he ran out to the restroom. Carol was also concerned that there were now only 4 hours left until 8 p.m. She needed Joe to at least get down to the first 2 victims for her to feel more accomplished. Carol interrupted Joe. "Hey, I need you to finally get to the first victim. How did you do it? You can always go to the other details about your island setup later. For now, please tell me about your first victim." Joe looked as if he was offended. "Very well then. I was getting to that part, but if you want to jump into the chase, that's fine. So what I did was that after I gained Chad's trust, I finally invited him out to my island for 3 days for a personal one-on-one skydiving adventure. What I did was we packed our parachutes. I made sure to pack mine correctly. Then I purposely packed Chad so that his chute wouldn't open. I made 2 color codes of the chutes so that I could tell which one was which. Now, to tell you how we managed to do this in the plane without a pilot, it was easy because my plane came with the state-of-the-art AI autopilot. With all the cash I earned, a plane like this was chump change to me. We both boarded the plane together and we let the autopilot do the rest. As the plane took off, we made some small chit-chat here and there. We even had a couple of glasses of wine to calm our nerves. The only difference was I drugged his drink with strong anxiety pills to make him calm, and maybe too calm. As we were getting higher up, we started putting on our gear. I made sure to install a body cam on top of both of our helmets. The only difference was mine was going to matter and his wasn't. All I needed to do was get all the footage on my camera for the events that were about to unfold. After we got all ready to go, the door to the plane slid open and it was time for us to both jump. He was more calm and mellow, where I was getting filled with excitement and adrenaline. We both looked at each other and jumped from the plane. We both free fell to the ground. I was screaming and hollering, having a good time, where Chad was laughing and woo-hooing. I spun around in circles and pretended to act like a superhero. Chad just stayed face down the whole time. He was much too relaxed to try any tricks. After what seemed to be 10 minutes or so, I could see that the ground was getting closer and closer to us. I knew the time to pull the chute was drawing near. So right before I pulled the cord to my chute, I gave Chad the signal to pull his cord. When he went to pull it, Chad soon realized in horror the chute wouldn't open. He instantly panicked. It would appear that no matter what kind of drug you're on, fear of possibly dying soon will snap you out of any calm mood you were in. I could see his panic-stricken face very well. I made sure to capture his facial expressions on my camera. He screamed even louder as he desperately once more tried to pull his cord. Still, to no avail. All while this was happening, I was laughing and smiling. However, the fun would soon end for me. Every second on the way down, he was yelling and pleading out for help. Not too much longer. I pulled the cord from my chute. The parachute opened up instantly for me, with relative ease. I was pulled up high into the air with the wind being caught under my chute. I was about 5 or 6 feet above him. He was still falling faster and faster. Every second the ground was drawing closer and closer for him. As for me, I was slowly, gently drifting to the ground at a snail's pace in comparison. Chad was screaming every second on the way down. Then, not too long after, silence. His body hit the green grass and splattered all over the ground. To a normal person, this would be disgusting. For me, though, I couldn't wait to get down and see the remains for myself. After about 4 minutes of drifting back down to earth, I finally got to the ground with relative ease. I unattached my chute and went to investigate. His arms and legs were both separated from his body. Chad's head was caved in badly, and his face was no longer recognizable at all. Blood was smeared all over and around his body. Keep in mind, I was filming all of this. Joe was again interrupted. Max made a few gagging sounds as if he was going to vomit. He raised one of his index fingers into the air as if to say, 1 second. He covered his mouth with his other hand and quickly exited the room. As that was happening, Carol was more disturbed than she was yesterday. Despite this, she still had to continue with the notes. Joe sat there looking pretty annoyed that he was interrupted. There was an awkward moment of silence that followed. This silence lasted for about 2 whole minutes until Max finally came back into the room. He had a look of embarrassment on his face. Joe looked over at Max and asked, "Are we good now? Are you sure that I can continue without being interrupted again?" Max nodded his head quickly and he made his way back to the camera and turned it back on. He resumed filming and Carol was ready to continue with her notes. Joe continued as well. "Well, as I was saying before, I had brought a few things along with me. You see, I came prepared. I had a small traveling pack with supplies, a pair of rubber gloves, and a couple of sturdy trash bags as well. After recording what I wanted to record, I put on the gloves and I put the dismembered remains in trash bags. I made sure to pick up every last piece of Chad's body parts, not leaving a trace behind. I carefully pulled the grass out of the ground that had blood on it. I even put the bloody grass into the bag. I mean, yeah, sure, this was still on my private island, but I didn't want to be careless either, just to be safe. So after a while, parts of the grass with blood on it were gone, and the brown dirt remained in parts of where the body had landed and bloody grass once was. When I knew that it was cleaned up to the best of my ability, I knew that I was going to have a long hike back home. It was okay. I was prepared. I ended up dragging the bags alongside the ground as I made my way back home. I made my way over to the pig pen. I was sure to have them starve for 3 whole days prior to this. They always say that a herd of pigs could devour a human corpse in a matter of minutes. So now was the time to put that theory to the test. I walked over to the pig pen area. I opened up the gate and then I yelled, "Here, piggies, come and get it." I hurled the 2 bags right into the center of the mud pit. Soon 10 or so pigs came running up to the bags. They ripped and shredded it open with their teeth. Not before long they chewed on the flesh of the dismembered body parts. They seemed to enjoy their little snack as they chewed down on it so fast there was nothing but bone left, which was the plan all along. I enjoyed every moment of this. I know it does sound off, but I did. After they were finished, I herded them back into their pens. I gathered the bones of what was left of Chad's remains and made my way to my workshop, which was in the garage. I made my way over to the steel table and carefully put the bones on top of it. I grabbed a plastic tarp and I placed it all around the table on the floor. I put on a filter mask and some safety goggles and picked up my sledgehammer. I slammed the hammer down on the bones. My goal was to crush them into complete dust. I did this to ensure once again to cover my tracks. I wanted to double my efforts to not get caught. I made sure to crush the arm and the skull and the leg bones as well as the feet. Once I finished, I grabbed a small broom and a dustpan, and I made sure to sweep up all of it. I dumped all of the dust into a big Ziploc bag. I took a marker and I wrote on the bag, "Chad." I took the baggie and walked over to one of the safes in my workshop. I entered the combination and put the baggie inside of it, then carefully closed the safe door. Once that was done, it was time for a shower. It was quiet all throughout my mansion. The workers would be arriving the next day. After my shower, I enjoyed a fine bottle of wine and relished over what I had successfully accomplished. I knew I wouldn't get caught. After all, I had covered all my tracks. It would be a few more weeks before I would be ready again for my second murder. Carol had a few questions. "So you must be very paranoid even after you did it, right? I mean, you made sure to cover all your tracks. Weren't you scared that someone might have been around in the last area of his known cell phone signal?" Joe's smile widened. "Which is why before we left I destroyed his phone, just to be safe. Like I said before, I couldn't be too careless, so I feel like we're spinning wheels here. I am anxious to get started with explaining my second murder. All I ask is please try to reserve any questions until the very end." Carol nodded her head and was ready to hear some more. "Well, anyways, the next murder didn't happen until 3 months later. I made sure I didn't hear anything about any missing people reports. It would also be the same for when I'd go to the local town. That was off-island, of course. The town was about 75 miles away from me. I would stop in there from time to time to get supplies or eat at a local restaurant. Another hobby I picked up around town was listening to the local gossip about the other town's residents. I figured I might be able to find my next victim here. Not too long after, I soon found another one. Every time I went into the town, there seemed to be this local bum who always seemed to hang out in the alleyways of the local businesses and restaurants, always digging into the trash cans and looking for any food scraps that he could find. Well, one day when I was at a bar, I overheard some of the locals talking. They were bitching and crying on and on about how the bum was making the town look horrible. Also, they just wished that he would up and vanish. They both agreed that the town would be better off without him. When I heard that, that's when my brilliant mind started brainstorming." Carol instantly rolled her eyes at the remark. "I thought to myself, well, hell, I could do that for you guys." So on a rainy and stormy night, I paid another visit to the town. Due to the weather, all of the locals seemed to be indoors for the most part. I opened up my umbrella, and then I sought out after the bum. It was at this second that Carol raised her hand. I don't mean to interrupt. I really don't. But do you have to use that word bum? It's not appropriate. Joe laughed his ass off in response. "Come on, lady. I am a serial killer. Do you think I give a damn about respecting anyone?" "No, I don't. No more interruptions." Carol just shot Joe a dirty look and waited for him to continue. "I happened to find him in an alleyway as usual, and he was trying to cover himself up with some newspapers to shelter from the storm. It wasn't working for him, so I took a deep breath and approached him. Also, I had a knife on me just in case he tried anything funny with me. I had to always be prepared, you see. When I finally made my way up to him, it was the first time that I actually saw for myself what he looked like. He had a long beard that hadn't been shaved in what seemed to be years, and his hair was all dirty and matted. He also had a few scars across his face. His eyes were a dirty brown, and he was wearing a wet, dirty scarf around his neck. He also wore a filthy trench coat. When I walked up to him, I held out my hand and I said, "Hey, you look like you can use some shelter, food, water, and a few other things. If you don't mind coming along with me." He stood up. He took my hand. I could feel that it was all calluses. They were rough and not smooth at all. I had a thought of just killing him right then and there, and I could either stab him or strangle him with his scarf and just leave the scene. Then perhaps no one would ever know or even care. However, I thought it would be anticlimactic. I wanted to murder him in a unique way. I just hadn't decided how to go about it yet. Once I was able to gain his trust, we both headed back towards the island. I piloted my yacht for this mission, so I placed him securely on board. We arrived back to my personal island about 2 hours later. Once we both arrived, I safely docked my boat. I personally escorted him safely all the way back to my mansion. Once we finally made it back, I had a servant make him a hot meal, which consisted of a large New York steak, baked potato, cheese on broccoli, and white rice. He ate rather quickly. He had a piece of chocolate cake and ice cream and a fresh slice of apple pie, if I remember correctly. As he ate, I introduced myself, and he told me his name was Jerry. Not before long we had a conversation about how he came home one day and he found his wife cheating on him with another man. Jerry just left, and not too long after his wife filed for divorce, and he lost his house and his dog. All Jerry had left was a car to get back and forth from work. However, he started to drink very heavily, and he had gotten fired when he came to work one day with alcohol on his breath. As I listened to Jerry's story, I felt bad for him. I truly did. I even started to have sympathy for him. I actually considered sparing his life. This would be the first and only time that I would feel this way towards my victims. After he ate, I had him take a hot shower and ordered my servants give him a good clean shave. After a week of him staying with me, Jerry had been well treated and well fed. I still hadn't decided to kill him yet. I was actually struggling to make my decision to do so, until one night. I made sure that he had lodging in the private guest house. During his final days on my island, things were pretty normal for the most part, until I happened to stumble across his wallet. One thing you need to know about Jerry in particular is I made sure that he was treated with the best, not just the meals. We gave him a manicure and other things. However, my opinions of him changed once I started to dig into the man's background. It would turn out that I would open a door that I wasn't ready for. Using his ID, I searched online to see if I could find anything at all. Sure enough, I did. I soon found out that this guy lied to me. Jerry got a divorce from his wife because he would beat her often after he got drunk. He was arrested for domestic disturbance and violence and was also a common petty thief who robbed a convenience store for a total of $100 after he shot the clerk right in the arm. He somehow had his charges dropped in the courtroom because some dumbass officer, didn't read him his rights for some reason or another. These crimes that were committed shifted my feelings from him from love to instant hatred. So the next day was Monday. It was my time to start planning how I was going to murder Jerry. I wasn't sure just yet until he came to the kitchen table to have his freshly made and delicious breakfast. He sat down at the table and was eager to eat his meal. It was when I realized how much he loved food. That was what I was going to use. So my plan was then set. Monday through Sunday, I made sure to have my chefs make the best breakfast meals that they could. This also counted towards a lunch and dinner as well. So all that week, he had a variety of meals, the best that my money could ever buy. Shrimp and lobster, steaks and potatoes, fettuccine Alfredo, you name it. I made sure all that week he was well fed. Then on the following Monday I had it all stop. It was at this time that I had decided I was ready to kill him, but slowly. As before, I made sure that I had all of my servants leave my home and receive paid time off. Once I knew that it was just me and Jerry, that's when I made my move. I woke up before him the following morning. I hurried and made it to his bedroom door. I managed to lock the door from outside the bedroom. I even pushed a dresser right in front of the door for good measure. I forgot to mention for shits and giggles that I had security cameras placed all throughout my mansion. Another thing to mention, deep in my basement, I had a monitor room where I could survey Jerry's bedroom. I patiently waited until he woke up, which happened to be around 9 a.m. I was eager to watch this unfold. He got up from his bed, still in his pajamas. Jerry went to open the bedroom door and soon found out that the door would not open at all. He gave the door handle a couple of jiggles. I basically could control how long he was in there for. As soon as he realized that he couldn't get out, Jerry screamed out for help. I listened with glee and let this go on for a while. About 20 minutes or so, if I remember correctly. He eventually gave up and went back to his bed. I responded to him through a speaker that I had previously installed in the room, so I could still communicate with him. I told him that there were water bottles, about 20 of them, under his bed, and also 2 whole loaves of bread. I explained to him slowly and carefully what I had intended to do with him. You see, if you haven't figured it out by now, I plan to slowly but surely starve him to death. Joe paused for a second and looked at Carol for a reaction. She indeed had one. It was one of shock and utter disgust. Her jaw dropped to the floor. Carol decided to hold her questions until the very end. There was a moment of awkward silence until Joe decided to continue on with his sick, twisted story. Well, anyways, I wanted to see if Jerry could last 7 days with just bread and water. I thought to myself this would be an interesting torture. He would soon be missing those nice new meals that I introduced to him over the time of his stay. Not too long after the first day, he nearly went through half of his first loaf of bread. He also drank about 5 of his water bottles. All while this was happening, he kept screaming to be let out, and then he just wanted to leave. At one point, Jerry even had to go to the bathroom. I instructed him through the intercom that there was a bucket waiting for him in the bedroom closet. He wasn't very happy, of course, but he didn't have much of a choice anyways. So this was what it was like for the majority of the 7 days. It consisted of Jerry crying about how he was starving and that his bread wasn't enough food for him. They say that you can only go so many days without food or water. I was curious to see if he would still be alive by the 7th day. Around that time he had no bread left and just about 1 bottle of water remained. He was clearly still alive by that 7th day. I guess starving him to death failed, or my patience ran out. I really couldn't tell which was first, if I'm being honest. Jerry's strength was gone and he was barely moving around. I mean, he was forced to stay in a bedroom with a bucket full of his urine and feces after all, Joe said, giving a seemingly innocent shrug. Carol fought hard this time to stop rolling her eyes. Joe continued on. After a while of this happening, I started to feel bored. I will admit this kill wasn't one of my favorites, as it was honestly very lame to me. So I swore out loud to myself that after this one was finished, I would make the rest of my murders more over the top. I didn't want to be another lamer that just used guns and knives and so on and so forth. So having that thought occur to me on the 7th day, I decided to change things up a lot from here on out. I went to the monitor room and walked up to one of the surveillance monitors. I could see that Jerry was still alive. I just wanted to confirm it for myself first. He was indeed skinny once more, and of course he was moving very slow. I decided to set a timer for half an hour till his door opened. I also made sure to remove that dresser door as well. Once finished, I made a mad dash down to the kitchen with glee. I was now changing my plan up a little bit. I hurried and whipped up a nice breakfast. I made some waffles and pancakes, eggs, and some ham. I turned on the kitchen fan to get the smell wafting over to him so he could smell it. I was luring Jerry to his own death trap, and he was too hungry, weak, and oblivious to even realize it. You see, I knew that smell would find its way upstairs. In due time, the timer soon went off, Jerry was unaware of the fact that I was already standing right next to him as he was leaving the room. As he slowly made his way down the stairs, I stood by waiting patiently and listened as well. I waited for him to take about 3 to 4 more steps away from me until he neared the very top of the stairs. Also, a side note, I left a cane right next to the top of the staircase for him to use. It didn't take him long to smell the wonderful aroma from the kitchen. Jerry headed down the stairs slowly, with his right hand gripping the staircase, while his left hand was clutching onto the cane. He only took 2 or 3 steps down the stairs when I appeared right behind him. I raised both of my arms right into the air and I yelled out, "Surprise!" I pushed with both of my hands and he fell and rolled down the stairs. I'd say that Jerry must have done 2 or 3 good tumbles down the stairs before he hit the tile floor. Despite all that, though, he was still breathing, just barely. He seemed to have broken one of his arms, and he was crying out in pain. Also, a trail of blood flowed out of the top right side of his head. I hurried my way over and looked down at him. With his one good arm, Jerry managed to raise it somehow and whack me in the shin with a couple of hits. While he was doing that, the bum was barely audible, but was still trying to defend himself to the very end. He also managed to only call me dirty bastard, and that I would pay for this one day. This angered me, of course. I wasn't ready to kill him just yet. I hurried back to my garage, and I put on one of my many pairs of black leather gloves. I also grabbed another tarp, and this one was also new. I always made sure to buy a new one of everything I used. Once I grabbed what I needed, I went back to Jerry. I walked over to him and knelt down on top of his stomach. I carefully put my hands over his neck and choked him slowly. Jerry was still trying to say something, but I couldn't make it out, nor did I care. I was making sure he heard me. I said to him that all I did was show him compassion and let him into my home and fed him and gave him shelter. That all he could do was just call me a bastard. Now hear me out. I was being a smart ass. I knew what I was doing. I was just messing with him. As Jerry gurgled and struggled for breath, he was losing his strength as he continued to struggle. It was in this final struggle for life he soon passed on. I wrapped his body up into that tarp. It was time to take another visit to the piggy farm, you see. Yes, they were just as hungry as they were before. Once they were officially done eating the flesh of his body, I gave Jerry's skeleton the same sledgehammer treatment as I did with Chad's. That about wraps up that whole murder. All I did after that was wait it out for a few months. Sure enough, just like clockwork, I didn't hear any rumblings from the locals of the town. From where Jerry came from, I didn't even have any surprise warrants from the police or anything of the sort. Even though I felt like I had successfully pulled off another murder, that didn't mean that I wasn't plagued with paranoia. It was because of this reason that I ended up waiting another 2 whole years before my next. That is pretty much the gist of that one. Now, if you have any questions, I am ready to answer. Joe slowly stood up from the floor. He stretched out his arms and legs. Carol wrote down a lot of what she heard. Even when Joey finished talking, she still couldn't help but feel sick to her stomach just hearing how depraved one man could be. She hated hearing all of this, but still needed to get the job done. Carol set her pen down for a moment and looked up at Joe. She pulled a tape recorder out from her purse and asked Joe for permission to record him personally, other than being recorded by the video camera. He nodded his head and she asked the questions. "So, you mean to tell me you didn't have any remorse at all?" she asked with a cold tone in her voice. Joe replied, "Why, yes, ma'am, if I may call you that." Carol nodded her head. "This was the only time I had a shred of remorse. That was until, as I said before, how I found out about his history." "Why do you think you get a kick out of others suffering and then being murdered?" Joe just shrugged both shoulders. "I don't know. It's like I said before. I was bored, and who knows? I guess the wiring in my brain is all messed up. I mean, if I wasn't deemed insane prior to my murders, I am now for sure. I was soon deemed legally insane after I turned myself in." "You said that you didn't get paranoid about getting caught. After a while, you were confident you could get away with it, and then the paranoia would subside. Did that paranoia eat at your soul? Did you ever feel like your consciousness would come back to haunt you? Or like karma would get you?" There was a moment of silence. Joe had a nervous expression on his face. He even sweated a little. All he could muster was, next question, please." Carol then gave a big thumbs up. "Okay then, very well." Max interrupted Carol before she could even get a chance to ask Joe another question. "You're a monster. I can't believe that you would treat other human beings like that," Max shouted as he was pointing his finger right at Joe. "You are a shit stain to human society. I can't believe that you are still alive." Joe wasn't happy about this at all. He growled back, "God! God! Get this man away from me! That is it. The interview is over. No more. I will not go into the rest of this anymore." Carol panicked. Her career was on the line and Max was screwing everything up. She stood up from her chair and tried to calm Joe down. "Joe, please, please calm down. It'll be okay." At the same time, the guard made his way over to Max and escorted him out towards the front entrance. Carol pleaded, "Joe, please calm down. We can work something out. Please. We need to hear the rest of your story. It doesn't have to be today, of course. Now that you're upset, please don't give up on telling us the rest now." Joe looked at Carol. He seemed to be considering what she had to say. Joe took a couple of breaths and started slowly to calm down. "Okay, very well. I agree to continue with the rest. However, I happen to have just one condition, that when you two come back, your camera guy has to wear a ball gag in his mouth. He then will still be allowed to film me. It will also convince me that I won't have to hear any more stupid words that will come out of that man's mouth." Carol was shocked at hearing this. "Are you trying to crack a joke?" Carol asked. This wasn't what she had in mind in order to keep Max quiet. The fact Joe wanted Max to be humiliated like that didn't seem fair. "Well, Joe, you see, I don't think we can do that. I could talk to my boss and see if I can work something else out. Please, I am willing to work with you." Joe flashed yet another wicked smile. "Well, yes, you can. But I just don't want him to say anything to me anymore, is all. After what happened today, I think that it would be good to end it here. Carol nodded her head and grabbed her things as well as Max's equipment that was left behind when he was escorted to the entrance. When Carol and Max met in the hallway, she turned to Max and glared coldly at him. You idiot! What the hell were you thinking? You want us to lose our job? I promised him that I would talk to Randall about finding a way to get you to shut up. I'll have you know that he wanted you to wear a ball gag the next time you step foot in this presence, just to keep you quiet. Now, when we get back to the car, I'm going to have to call the boss. Also, I don't like Joe myself. I can't stand the man. Yet you don't see me acting out like he does now, do you? Sorry. That was all Max could stammer. In fact, I'm so angry with you, I don't want to hear another peep from you. With that, Carol turned and made her way back to the front entrance. Max didn't dare go against her request. He could tell she was visibly pissed. They both made it back to the car 5 minutes later. Once they both were inside, she pulled out her cell and dialed Randall. Max couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed of himself by now. He couldn't help how he felt, though what he heard would be enough to make anyone upset. He wondered why Carol wasn't reacting the same way. Randall answered the phone and Carol explained everything that happened with Max and Joe. Needless to say, their boss wasn't happy about hearing any of this. In the end, Carol's boss decided that Max would have to come back with his mouth completely duct taped, so that he couldn't say anything else. Mostly because he couldn't get another cameraman to replace him either, because they were all off doing other projects. Randall also said that if Max tried anything like that again, he would be fired. Plain and simple. Then the boss said he would personally step in to fill the role if it came down to that, and that this was his first and final warning. Carol just listened to every word that Randall spouted out on the other end. When the phone call was finally over, Carol shut her phone off and let out a loud sigh of relief. She explained to Max all the info that her boss laid on her. Max wasn't happy about the whole duct tape idea, but he still remained silent. The drive back to Max's place was awkward. No one had spoken a word until Carol pulled up right in front of Max's driveway. He grabbed his camera from the back seat and gave Carol a weak wave goodbye before going inside his home. Later, Carol walked up to her front door. Before she could even have the chance to open the front door, Sam opened it for her. Carol, I've been eagerly waiting for you to come back home ever since you left, Sam said. Wait till you find out what happened while you were gone. You're never gonna believe it. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Chapter 2 of Murder Report, an original horror novel by James Acosta. I really enjoyed this chapter. It was quite a long chapter. I don't think most of the chapters in the book are that long, but we got a lot of backstory into Joe's killings, which I think was a lot of fun, and a lot of information was given. Max just needs to learn to keep his little mouth shut, be professional, and make that money. Joe has done some wicked stuff, The skydiving thing was very original, very creative. I gotta hand it to James on that one. That was very cool. The starving to death thing, I really thought, after the 7 days, he was gonna, make the guy repeat another 7 days with half the water, half the bread, and then if he survived that, he'd have to do it again where he cut the half down in half until there was, pretty much nothing there to last 7 days. But it went a different route. And you know what? I had fun with it. Because we got to have a bit of Joe, slipping off his mask a little bit as he told the story. His insanity showing. I tried to portray that in my voice the best I could. Like a slipping into insanity type thing. Definitely this book has piqued my interest. And I can't wait to see what's on the way in the book. James has told me that there's a paranormal angle to everything. And from what she saw in her house and what Sam's telling her now at the end of the chapter, it sounds like we're about to find out exactly what that is. So, definitely excited to finish this one. I had planned on releasing this book, all the chapters by the end of October, and then releasing the unabridged version on Halloween Day. That's not going to happen now. I will try to get it out as quickly as possible. I'll still be doing the prologue and or chapter 1 of Jeremy Terry's Halloween Massacre, Michael Myers versus Leatherface. I'm going to put out the preview of that book on Halloween. I'm excited to read that one for the first time. And so sorry I didn't get more of these chapters out this month like I planned. I'll let you into my real life for a second. Had a vehicle problem a few weeks back. My employment is what I do. I have to use my vehicle all the time. My wife and I have one vehicle at the moment, and it broke down. It was very expensive to fix, but thankfully a great friend, Nathan Lark, came through to aid us and helped us with that. But because of the over a week that we missed being out on the road doing what I do, it set us back really bad. And it seems like no matter how hard I hit it right now, working, that I just cannot fill that gap financially. And it's got to the point where it's hurting us with certain things, utilities and stuff like that. So I'm just having to work a lot right now. And by the time I get home, I'm wore out, I'm tired. But I promise I will get as many chapters out as possible. I really am enjoying this book. I'm sorry you had to wait so long for another chapter. I will try to get one out sooner this time. And I hope you enjoy the Halloween narrations that'll be dropping on Halloween. If you haven't done so already, check out the episode of Slash Track Saturday Morning. It's a show we do on the secondary channel, Slash Tracks Network, with Alex Vanover, which is not a horror channel. We made that channel for all the non-horror content. And Slash Track Saturday Mornings is a show where we discuss and review retro 80s and 90s cartoons and shows and stuff, like Saved by the Bell even, Power Rangers. We just did a real Ghostbusters episode, and we dropped that one here on the main channel as like a preview, a Halloween special, as it were. And we discussed and reviewed one of the greatest episodes of the real Ghostbusters, in my opinion, which is When Halloween Was Forever. And it's the introduction, the debut of Sam Hain, the pumpkin-headed ghost from the real Ghostbusters. He played, I think he did he was in like 2 or 3 episodes over the years of that show. But his first appearance was very dark for the time, very scary for kids. I remember it scaring me as a kid. But we go into a great, great discussion and breakdown of the episode. I'm going to put a thumbnail for that episode on the screen. It should be up any second now, here at the end of my little rant. And I hope you'll check it out. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to support the channel. If you appreciate what I do, making all these dozens and dozens of hard-to-find, rare, expensive slasher and horror books available to you in audiobook form, and also all the fan fiction books and stuff that I've been narrating and writing myself. If you appreciate all that, and the reviews, the riffs, all of it, and would like to support the channel, you can do so at Patreon. You can do so through PayPal with like a super thanks tip, using a QR code. You can also order a Cameo video. We have several ways, even a Cash App handle. All the information to support the channel will be in the description below, and I promise I will make every attempt to get content out quicker after this upload. I'm just really trying in my real life to get things caught up. It just seems like it's going to take a little bit, but I'll do my best. Thank you all so much. Be excellent to each other, and remember, the sun never sets on those who ride into it. Thank you. See you soon.